Yeah, Apollo. I think you know. I don't know. I think you have him turned down or something like.
I don't
No
know if you can
comedic.
hear me. I don't know.
Really? Hold on, let me
If you
check.
don't
Hold
hear him
on, give me
currently
one
because he's
sec.
talking,
Alright,
then yeah.
but
Okay.
It's
All right,
laying
speak
faces
now.
if you did.
nigga, you higher than me, nigga.
Okay,
Are you good?
so, anyways, oh,
What is he saying, bro?
oh.
Yeah, hello, bro.
Okay, cool. Let's go. So, are you ready, Archie?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you right now. Yeah.
Yeah, what's up? All right.
Okay, I'll just give my opening statement, right? Pretty simple. Debate topic is just going to be on God's existence, right? Uh, Archie will be taking the position of agnosticism, whereas he'll just be critiquing my argument for why God exists. And I'll be taking the affirmative position, whereas I'll be taking the position that God does in fact exist. So that's basically just it. So, alrighty, let's get into it. So it's an ontological argument, really. I think by definition, God has to exist. And by God, I'm defining God to be an omnipotent, omniscient being that exists in the universe. Right? Basically, yeah, that creates the universe, to be very specific. So would you agree that for anything X, it's either mind dependent or mind independent?
And what exactly does that entail?
It entails that it would be a true dichotomy, that for anything X, it is mind dependence or mind independence, if you agree with this or not.
I don't think that gives me much, so I'll just ask what evidence is in favor of this.
Okay, the evidence in favor of that proposition is the law of excluded middle. The definition of a thing, quite literally, would entail that for anything X, it's either mind dependent or mind independent.
Interesting. Okay. And does this
Yeah,
apply in every context, or what context are you applying this?
of course, definitely. Our conceptual boundaries, the conceptual boundaries that we assign to concepts and objects, requires the LEM to be set into place as a true proposition or law of logic. So that's why
Do
it
you,
holds.
do you think this applies to all states of existence?
Yeah, definitely. Why wouldn't it?
Interesting. So, can I ask you, do you think this
You're asking
applies
me
like
why would it be the case
probabilistically
that
as
this is
well?
true?
No, that's not what I was asking. So, probabilistically, do you think everything has to be either set in stone, like something has to be happening or not be happening?
Of course, definitely. In fact, there's an inductive case supporting that proposition, so probabilistically that would be true.
So, can I ask you something? Can you explain the behavior of what seems to be our fundamental property of existence acting as such thing?
How does this address my argument?
Because if you're saying that it is the case that everything has to be either this or that, I'm giving you an instance, or at least I'm going to take you down an instance to where when we quantize our reality, the rules seem to change accordingly. So, but before I even get to all of that drastically, seemingly I have to address or understand whether you agree that this is the case. Like, do you agree that our fundamental properties of existence work around like probabilistic clouds of existence?
Yeah, I think you're just talking about wave functions, right? If you're going to make the
Yeah,
argument or
that's
ask me
exactly what I'm talking
if I
about.
believe, yes, none of this actually addresses the LEM, by the way, or even the proposition of certain, right? So it appears to be the case that you're asking me if I believe that things are static, things are unchanging, things are set in stone. If you're
That's
going
not what
under
I'm
that
asking.
definition, well, you said that you asked me specifically, do you believe that things are set in stone, which actually
That's not what
implies
I'm
you
asking.
asked me if it's static. That was what you asked me verbatim. But if you want to change the question, that's okay. What's the new question?
So the question I asked previously was regarding probabilistic clouds, and I asked you if you think two states of existence can occur at the same time or either be set in stone happening or not happening. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so you did ask originally that if I believe that things are set in stone, and then you asked
No,
me a new question with additional qualifiers, which is if I think things like probabilistic clouds are things which assigns
I
to
don't think this
fundamental
answers the
properties of the
question,
universe.
honestly.
I know it doesn't. It's a clarification of what the
Oh,
question
got you.
is.
So you know you're failing to answer the question?
Yeah, sometimes you can respond to a
Got you.
question relevantly without saying
That's
yes or no,
okay.
but
You
by
can take your
clarifying what the
time.
question is.
No,
Yeah, I'm
it's
taking
okay.
my time, definitely.
Good.
So to address the question, right, the addressal towards the question is again to point out that it has nothing to do with the argument nor the proposition,
How so?
because of the fact that whether or not someone is an explanatory mechanism for the fundamental properties that you're referencing in the question, it does not address the premise that I've just postulated
I
regarding
understand your
whether or
conclusion. I'm
not
asking how so.
anything acts is mind dependent or mind independent.
Yeah.
Or
No,
the
I understand your conclusion. I'm asking how so.
Wait, sorry, that was not a conclusion. That was a justification for the proposition that the
But
question
I
was,
don't believe
well,
it was. I don't believe it
you
was.
don't
So I'll just
believe
go
it
in
was.
further to my
Oh, I
point.
don't
No.
feel it was.
So
The term
basically,
is there for this.
excuse me.
Is
I'm
this an
trying
appeal to
to.
belief also?
That's okay. I'm trying to answer, and I'm trying to give my argument. So I'm just going to continue now, and you can be local muted if
You're
you want to
giving an
interrupt.
argument. You asked me a question.
So obviously, we understand when we quantize to the level below subatomic reality, we understand
Yeah.
states of existence seem not to be deterministically set. Right? This is trivial. Especially if we go down to electrons, if we go down to the
What do you
fields
think
to
quantum
the
physics
fields
means by
if we
deterministic?
go down to the level and the fields to where these
Oh, you happened again.
seemingly
First, give it
interact,
some time, guys.
we understand that things are not they aren't 70 30, they aren't 80-20, they're always 50-50. And I'll give an example of this. Okay, obviously, are you aware of what an electron is before I engage in this?
Okay, now that you're back from Afghanistan, okay, that was a really interesting
That
rant
was a
right there. But
question.
look, we're just gonna focus on.
That was a
I'm done.
question.
We're just gonna focus on what's actually
So
relevant to the
I'll just
conversation.
go over
Okay.
what they are if you don't know what they
Oh, you're
are.
gonna just
So
rant again? Okay,
obviously,
let's give them another
electrons are
5
one of the
minutes, guys.
fundamental parts of reality. They make up the building blocks that make up the levels of what atoms are. Okay, then and obviously in conjunction after that, they make up what molecules are. We all know the fundamental states of reality, right? But something is interesting when we actually observe the nature of reality on such a level of existence. We don't seem to actually have set in stone events. We don't seem to actually have these excitations in quantum fields when these virtual particles are constantly appearing and appearing and waving and waving and waving. And there's a wave big enough to form one particle. These interactions are not certain, right? When we measure them and when we get closer, it is the case that we can never have an event that is happening or not happening. These events seemingly happen simultaneously. Okay. Now,
Yeah, so just
obviously, if
because
we
there's
were
no
to have a box,
deterministic facts,
excuse me,
are
if
you
we were
not
to
done
have a
talking?
box and we were to, no, I'm not, and put it to, let's say, a color changer, or let's say a hardness changer, the color would either change to black or white, or it would change to soft and hard. Do you agree to this? Yes or no? Okay, I'll answer. So if you don't agree to this, I can send citations after just not to be disingenuous. But when we observe this behavior, we observe the natural nature of it seems to be 50-50. The only time that an actual event is set in place or certain, okay, is when we already have a preset color from when it was changed initially. But we have no
How many more minutes
particle,
left?
no fundamental feature of reality that actually points to this initial input being certain. And I think if that's the case, and our fundamental natures of reality function in such an uncertainty, that there's a literal probabilistic cloud around the actual existence of these seeming particles, I think that is enough of an argument to suggest an event to where something is happening while simultaneously not happening. Now, if you don't believe in superposition, if you don't believe in this, I'd like to hear your debunk towards it. Go ahead.
Okay,
By
so
the way, I'll cite
considering
it in
that
chat.
you talked for a pretty long while, I expect that when I'm talking, there would be no interruptions, just like I did not interrupt your. The probabilistic cloud you keep on referencing, by the way, you repeatedly referenced as the basis for your response, is not even something which actually addresses what I'm saying, because what I was talking about, give me 1 second. Hold on, give me one.
And go for it.
1 second. Damn, I guess he conceded.
And I'll put that in chat, by the way, the quantum superposition. And I'll also put what a wave
Yeah, I'm
function
done.
is as well.
So, anyways, as I
Good.
was saying, yeah, as I was talking about, right? So the probabilistic clouds you referenced, okay, when you were talking about the idea of these things being non-deterministic in the context of quantum physics, when they're talking about indeterministic properties, they're not saying that there's not a fact of the matter, okay? Nor are they saying that it is the case that, well, it would be true they cannot assign any sort of truth value in a binary sense, okay? What it actually is referencing, by the way, is epistemic values. So the term probability is a conjunct of epistemic and mathematical values. In fact, it's mathematical values determined based off the data we have. And so in quantum mechanics, whereas you have instances like the quantum observer effect, for example, whereas the observations of particular particles, for instance, and things in the quantum realm affects the result of said thing, you have like instances whereas you have, for instance, indeterministic properties. But it's indeterministic not in the sense where there's not a fact of the matter regarding the properties, but rather it is indeterministic insofar as it would actually be something which is kind of like not known for certain given our current knowledge. So this does not actually attack the LEM because in the context of the LEM when you're talking about something being either true or false, respectively. What you're saying there is that it is something which is true or false independently of our knowledge, and so the LEM that I postulated are used rather for a justification for the question I've asked regarding whether or not it is true that for anything X, it is either mind dependent or mind independent, is not an epistemic, but rather it's a thesis regarding logic. It's a thesis regarding truth value assessment and investigation. So you, considering that you don't have the relevant knowledge on that, went off and derailed purposefully to quantum mechanics, which, by the way, does not even and is not incompatible with LEM.
This is quantum field theory. This isn't even quantum mechanics.
Hold on. You're doing. This is what you do, right? This is what you do, right? You fake laugh because you're going to destroy.
This isn't an argument.
Okay. So
this isn't an argument.
If you think that a set of reasons for a proposition is not an argument, maybe you need to revisit the definition of an argument. But before you even get onto that, okay?
This is useless.
I just want to touch on one more thing.
I'll just respond.
You're doing the interruption tactic.
The idea
you're actually
is,
so unconfident.
Right, we're going into the law of excluded middle. You have to understand what the law of excluded middle is. Definitionally, the law of excluded middle is just stating that for any proposition, either the proposition is true or the negation is true. Do you agree to this? Is this what you're referencing by the law of excluded middle? Yes or no? If it is what you're referencing on recording by that be, then obviously
you think it is the case that
is not what you're describing.
You
stated already that you admit that there is this level of uncertainty that is on the foundation. That is great. That is amazing. All right. But the what you're not getting exactly is how exactly much this uncertainty is tied. Now you attempt to completely misrepresent what supposition is, okay, by giving some dumbed down version of it. But the reality is we're not even discussing quantum mechanics, Apollo. So you're already seemingly confused. What we're describing, excuse me, I'm not done. What we're describing seems to be...
I was not done. You were talking.
What we're describing seems to be quantum field theory.
Maybe you need to call moderation into the conversation.
Or quantum mechanics does not account
take your time,
for creation. What it accounts for is what particles
just making up words along the way,
but it doesn't actually account for how these particles come into existence or how they are annihilated. These are not things quantum mechanics accounts for. So when we refer to this is quantum field theory, okay? Now the double slit experiment proves that this is something, and this is a phenomenon that happens in real life. This isn't something that's just epistemically and mathematically tied. No. This math actually describes something that's in reality. We understand that if we take particles, okay, if we were to have a particle gun, more specifically, if we were to have a photon gun or if we were to have an electron gun, we were to quantize ourselves to a very, very small level. We understand that we want to see what we want to, excuse me, I'm not done. What we would see is not tiny dots, right? We wouldn't see certain events being tied down. What we would see is a probabilistic wave of every single possible angle it could take, almost looking as if it's a wave, hence wave function, which is something you should know if you mentioned it earlier, okay? When we take this probabilistic wave, it is going to take every single possible solution and non-solution that it could take until it reaches that exact order. I already linked it in chat, okay? This experiment shows that these photons, okay, or that these properties, these fundamental properties of life, they don't act as particles or singularly, or well, at least what we thought particles act like, right? They're not some certain event that happens, Apollo. This isn't just because we're imagining it like that. This isn't because our physical processors fail, because we've tested it not just on photons, we've tested it on electrons, we've tested it on even bigger objects, Jimmy balls. That is true. That's a fact, by the way, people have tested on it, and I can link that to you. This isn't something that we just see in our mind. This isn't just some hallucination. This is real, dude. So I can link this to you if you want, but you can't be disingenuous and go off the rails when I explain something to you that's legitimate. You know what I mean? So go ahead and respond. I want an actual response. Because I am describing something that is happening at once, simultaneously. I'm not describing something that is within the idea of the law of excluded middle. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll respond like you asked me. Okay, so the reason as to why, and for one, when you're talking, when you're doing your rant and stuff, I ask you to prove the claim that the law of excluded middle is incompatible, with what you've mentioned, which you have not proven, but I'll just explain to you why it isn't, right? The reason why it isn't incompatible with what we're talking about, sir, or more specifically, the law of excluded middle and the proposition there is because what we're saying here is that, right, the law of excluded middle is merely making the assertion, right, that for any given proposition is determinately true or false. However, quantum mechanics does not actually assert that for any proposition are there propositions that are neither true nor false in the logical sense. Instead, what it even asserts is that the system in the state, right, in any given state where you have like a proposition lacks a definite truth value, it would lack a definite truth value until measurement. Now, just because something lacks a definite truth value until measurement in the context of quantum mechanics is not something which indicates the idea that it would be the case that there are in fact some instances where it lacks a definite truth value, because what they're really mentioning there is that they're talking about it lacking the truth value in the sense where we are unable to epistemically determine the truth value of something, considering that we do such in quantum mechanics through measurement. So you don't even understand the crux and the substrate of the points you're making and the information you're appealing to, because you have not done the relevant research into this to even understand this point properly. And so you came here thinking that this was actually a rebuttal, a refutation, a debunk to the LEM when it really isn't. So now that I've just pushed that point you've made, that really terrible atrocious argument made, off the table. Wait, hold on, you're interrupting again. See,
because you're not giving an argument. So, this is useless. Okay,
I don't even think you even know what a good argument is. So that's ironic. So again, just to go back to the point, and you're interrupting again. I thought you were fine by the interruptions.
And when I asked you seemingly if you agree or disagree with this, you didn't respond or say whether you disagree or disagree with this. You instead went on mute and quieted.
So you can't hold
now that you agree with this, we're going to explain as to why this is the case, and we're going to explain why these wave functions are things that we understand in reality. Now, you admitted that there is an uncertainty up until the point of measurement. I'm glad you somewhat understand the idea of what we observe. I'm glad you somewhat understand the idea of the wave or the double slit experiment to where we're talking about wave functions. But one thing you're seemingly not agreeing to for whatever reason, to which now I think you're just being disingenuous if you understand their uncertain measurement. That is exactly what I'm talking about. I am talking about them being uncertain until measurement. The point up until where they are uncertain, this is the input to where all of these are created. The point of uncertainty is the field of existence that I'm talking about. That's why I specified previously in this quantum field. This is vacuum. You understand? This is the vacuum I'm talking about of uncertainty. Okay? Now, if you think that this isn't the case, I'll just even show you by relating it in chat to you after I'm done. But the idea is when we're in this field, this vacuum, there is no certainty. There is no event. But this is the tiniest field we can get to. This is the very fundamental of existence. This is the existence in the vacuum of nature that connects everything in the universe to each other. Okay?
Are you done?
So if that is
I'll just respond to this real quick. Because you made a bunch of points.
Exactly what you're trying to
give me 1 second.
The reality
give me 1 second, Archi.
You're going to try to attempt to make any formal claim against this, you're going to have to address it for what it is. Because when you claim that this
so I'm going to address it, and I've already done this numerous times.
When you try
I've already done this numerous times. I've already done this numerous times, and I'm willing to do it again.
That this is true, or by saying that this is false,
I've already done this numerous times,
that is a lie. That is not what superposition is.
Look at this.
Look at this about superposition. What you're talking about here can actually describe whether it is true or false. We're not talking about superposition.
Finish up, boy.
Schrödinger could obviously feel to this. Niels Bohr can obviously feel to this. Every other physicist that has studied quantum mechanics can feel to this. Einstein
and they would disagree with you, by the way. They would disagree with you, by the way. They would actually laugh at what you're saying. All of those people would laugh at what you're saying currently. They would like literally mock you. They would like literally send you back to school in real life, like unironically.
I'm going to put it in chat. So go ahead and respond to my
we should focus on the meat and potatoes, right? So what you're talking about, there's the Copenhagen interpretation, which you perhaps don't even know the name for it. But irrespective of that, again, for the LEM to be incompatible with this field, quantum mechanics and that specific interpretation would have to contradict the law of exclusion in a formal logical sense. But it does not do that. What it does is it shows that physical properties may not have determinate values prior to measurement, which is not saying that prior to measurement, it is the case that it's neither true nor false in the logical sense, but rather it's to show, it's to demonstrate and exemplify that the question regarding these properties has no definite answer until measurement. When you're talking about the definite answer, wait, and you're interrupted again. Whoa, this is crazy. You just keep interrupting. Like, this is what I'm talking about.
True or false in a logical sense, whether this exists.
Because I want to confident,
because I want to answer my question. That's why.
And I stutter, by the way, but just to continue my point real quickly, do you understand the distinction between something being a fact and something being a certain fact?
Do you think this is true or false? Yes or no?
Of course, definitely. And do you understand the mechanics does not debunk the LEM?
I'm asking you whether this is true or false.
Take your time, Chim Chum.
Not an option. That was a disjunction, Apollo.
Do you understand that when you're talking about the deterministic natures of objects, you're just talking about the modality of objects, right? Do you understand the distinction between modal logic and classical logic? But do you understand the distinction between modal logic and classical logic, Archie? No, you
This
don't.
doesn't
So I'll
answer my
explain it for
question.
you.
This doesn't answer my
It
question.
does answer your question indirectly because what you're talking about, what you're referencing here, is the modality of these objects and properties and determining the truth value of these
That's not what I'm
propositions,
talking about.
not the
That's not what I'm
not
talking
the
about.
metaphysical nature
That's
of the
not what I'm
proposition.
talking about. That has nothing to do with
You
what I'm
don't
talking
even know
about.
what you're talking about.
That
You
has
don't
nothing
even know
to
what
do.
you're
You don't
talking
know what I'm
about.
talking about, and you don't know what you're
I
talking
know what you're
about,
talking
Paula.
about. I'm just
Listen, the
educating
idea
you on what you're
is I'm
talking about. And
referring
you're
you to
lost in the
distinguish
conversation.
in
Like, this
classical
is actually
logic.
embarrassing.
Answer my question,
Yeah,
Apollo. In
maybe I have to
classical
dog walk
logic,
you
is
one
it
more
true
time through
or
your own
untrue
points,
that the
okay?
particle
Look,
exists?
look, it's
In
okay. It's okay. I
classical
got you.
logic,
I
stop
got you, Archie.
stuttering, retard.
I'll
In
dog
classical
walk
logic,
you.
is
I'll
it true,
dog
yes
walk
or
you
no,
through your own
that this
points. I don't even
particle
know what you're
exists?
talking about stuttering.
You
You're the
can't
only
even
person
answer the
starting this
question. You
conversation.
couldn't even answer the question.
I
This is
just answered the
embarrassing.
question.
This is
You
an
don't even
actual
know what it
mockery.
means to answer a
This is
question.
an
That's
actual
embarrassing
mockery.
for
That's
you, that
fine.
is. It's
That's
very
fine.
embarrassing.
That's fine. We
It's
can
very
get the stick
embarrassing.
because he's
Do
embarrassing
you
himself.
understand that every single point you're making in this conversation is
That's
revitalizing my
that's
position,
not
dumb fuck?
convincing, dude. No one is
Nice
convinced
stutter,
by you.
nice stutter. We
That's
heard that one,
embarrassing.
Chip Chump. Anyways, lock and
Why are you
dipshit. Now
speaking
back
like
to
that?
what
You
I
just
was saying.
stuttered right
Back to
now,
what I
dude.
was
Are
saying.
you
Lock and
okay?
dipshit. Lock and dipshit. Step your
This is
rhetoric up, retard.
embarrassing. Yo,
So back
you're a
to what I
grown
was saying.
man,
This is
Apollo.
embarrassing.
Apollo,
Oh,
you're a
look at
grown
me,
man.
guys. I'm saying it's
You are a
embarrassing. Therefore, I'm
grown
winning the
man, dude.
conversation.
You're a grown man,
Look
dude.
at him going off
You're
points
a grown
again. This
man,
is
dude.
embarrassing. So look at this.
Again,
As
I'm
I'm saying,
embarrassing
yeah,
because
I'm a
as a
grown
grown
man.
man,
I'm
you're
a grown
making
man. It's funny you're
babies
talking
in a
about that because
Discord
you interrupt
VC.
me. You have
Got you.
demonstrated your incapability to
That's
hold an intellectually mature
embarrassing. You're making
conversation.
baby noises.
Dog,
Are
can
you
you actually
good?
respond to my point or are going to keep
What the
on
fuck are
ranting
you
like the retard
talking
you
about?
are?
I
You don't know
responded
what
to
I'm
your
talking about.
point,
Of course you
moron.
don't.
Are you
You gave a
okay?
trash response,
You're so dumb.
moron.
You
It was
don't
a
even know
trash
what my
response. I
response
pissed all
was.
over it. It
You're an
was a
idiot.
dog piss argument. Want to
Yeah,
try again?
you're an
I'm giving you
idiot.
another chance. I'm giving you a redemption arc
I'm
chance,
giving
but
you
I'm
another
asking you to
chance. You
give
might
another
want to
argument.
respond to
I'm
my
giving you a
argument
chance
before
right
you
now
get
to
blown out
redeem
in this
yourself, Archie. Give
conversation,
another
Apollo.
argument. Give a better
Apollo, you
argument.
might
Go
want to
for it, Chim Chum.
respond to my argument
Lock in,
before you
dipshit.
get blown out. I'm not referring to
Wait,
any
could you
specific
actually repeat my
modality, you
response to your
stupid
argument?
moron.
Could you
I'm
repeat?
asking
Could
you
you
for
repeat my
favor of
response to your
evidence.
argument?
I want evidence for your position,
I
Apollo. Do you
want evidence.
understand that? Apollo, I
I want
want
evidence.
evidence for
I
your
want evidence.
position,
I want
Apollo. Do you
evidence.
understand that? When you give a point, Apollo,
Yeah,
I
shut
want
up.
you to give
Anyways,
evidence behind your point. Do you understand that? I want you to give something behind your point. Do you get that? Do you get that?
no response. What's going
Do you
on?
get that? Yes or
Stun
no? I
lock.
already gave you something. It's
Oh
within a
shit! You can't
classical
even receive the
formation, with a
response. You're so
classical
bad at
logic.
this, Archie.
Yes or no?
You
Does this
just made
particle
up
exist?
words
If it is
all
the
the
case
way
that this
through at your
particle
own points,
exists
and you
or
don't
doesn't
even
exist, you're not
understand
describing to your
anything you're
position.
saying. I bet you're reading off
I
Chat
already responded to you.
GPT right now, Sunny
I
boy.
already
You're reading
responded to
off
you.
Chat
That's
GPT,
not embarrassed.
thinking that you're gonna
That's not.
actually have some.
I already responded to you. Yes or no? Does it true that the particle exists in classical logic? I just wanted to meet you so I can say that so the recording could hear that and how you don't answer that question. Good.
Particles, but about propositions. You understand the reference between the LEM and quantum mechanics are radically different insofar as one is about propositions and one is about particles which are non-propositional.
That's
You
okay.
understand
And
this?
that's okay. Listen. And I asked you, and I asked you specifically,
That's
is
a
the
stutter right there,
proposition
Jim Chum.
true, yes
Separate
or
game
no,
up.
that a
What's
particle
up with the
exists
stutters?
when it's before certainty or when it's
So
before
you
measurement?
agree that
Is
it
this
is
true,
the
yes
case
or
they're
no?
about different domains.
That
That's a
doesn't answer my
concession
question.
right there.
So you
Do you
can't
understand? You
answer
just
the
agree with
question.
the point
Is
which
there a
goes
reason
against
why
your
you're
own
running from the
position.
question? Is there a reason why you're running from the question, Apollo?
You think I'm running from
Is
your
there a
question
reason for it?
genuinely?
Because I
Are
promise
you
it's not that
delusional
scary
enough to
to
think you're
answer.
doing well in this
It's not that
conversation?
scary to answer, Apollo. Do you understand that? It's really not
You're a
that
funny
scary to
guy.
answer.
You're a funny guy to laugh at the very least. But
You're a funny
let's
guy to
focus on what I
fucking
was talking
embarrass,
about.
dude. You're a funny
It's
guy
my
to
turn to
pick your
actually talk,
brain
right?
and
My
embarrass you,
turn to talk.
retard, remember? What are you
Pipe
talking
down,
about, you
Chim Chum.
autist?
Pipe down, Chim Chum.
And you wonder
You're
why no one
embarrassing me.
likes you,
You're
bro. What are you
embarrassing me.
wrong with
I'm
you?
mocking you for
You're
stuttering.
embarrassing, dude.
Like, what are you talking about? You haven't stuttered the whole time. You've been making up
You
words. I've been
haven't stuttered
educating
the
you in those
entire time? Do
concepts
you
you've
believe
been
that? Do you
employing right now. What are you
genuinely
talking
believe you
about?
haven't
I've
stuttered the
been
entire
using
time? You
5%
actually
of my
believe
rhetoric,
that?
and
You
quite literally
actually
getting me
believe that?
rhetorically demolished. What are you even saying
You're
right now, dog?
embarrassing,
You're
Apollo.
getting
You're
rhetorically
embarrassing, Apollo.
demolished by a guy who just
You're
woke up with
embarrassing.
5%
You're
rhetoric. This is
embarrassing.
embarrassing, dog.
You're
This is
embarrassing.
actually crazy. Look,
You're
I don't even
embarrassing.
know I even pulled up the rhetoric stuff
You're
because we
embarrassing.
both know that
Okay, that's
without a
fine.
lot, like you don't have
Literally
good
going
rhetoric.
to
We
just